Welcome back to Breakfast with me, David Bull. The time 9:21 on Monday, December the 19th. Thank you very much indeed for all your messages. I'll read out some of those in just a minute. I want to return now to the strike action. As you know, Britain is clearly going to be brought to a grinding halt this week, the final week before Christmas. There is concerted industrial action from multiple unions. It will hit families across the country very hard. Indeed, it will also deny patients life-saving treatment. Obviously, it will jeopardise lives. I'm very deeply worried about how it will compromise the healthcare system and will paralyse the transport network. And particularly for elderly people stuck at home, if they trip and fall, there is every chance they will not get an ambulance to take them to hospital, and that could be devastating for them. So it's really a catalogue of chaos. We know tomorrow the nurses walk out, the ambulance workers go out on the 21st and 28th, then highway workers, the border force, just to add to the misery, 23rd to the 26th and 28th to the 31st. On top of that, Royal Mail buses, rail, and obviously the knock-on effects are huge. Now, the Chief of Defence Staff, Sir Tony Radakin, has said the armed forces should not be used as spare capacity. This is as 1,200 armed forces are replacing ambulance and border force. The hypocrisy here, of course, the army can't vote against this action. They can't do anything about it. They don't have a union, and so it seems very unfair to rely on the army yet again when many of them have just come back from active service and are actually trying to enjoy Christmas themselves. Joining me now is Ashok Kumar, who is Associate Professor of Political Economy at Birkbeck University. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So just in terms of the strike action, I mean, clearly it seems to me this is pretty much concerted effort across the board. Let's start with the nurses' strike. I have sympathy with the nurses. I think they have been underpaid for a long period of time, but to push for 19% I think is untenable. The independent pay review body suggests 4.75%. Surely there should be a meeting point somewhere in the middle.
Well, they're asking for 5% above the RPI. That doesn't mean that they will get that. I mean, I feel like, you know, the government's come out and been like, oh, this is a crazy number. Well, then give a counteroffer. That's how negotiations work. And it's also the question of, you know, when you have the RPI as high as it is, when you have falling spending across the economy, which might like accelerate us towards a recession, I think giving people what they're worth makes sense. I mean, you've had the hollowing out of the NHS, the 46,000 worker shortfall, nurses worker shortfall. We're paid less than the OECD average for nurses. They have a 20% per annum contraction over the last 14 years in their pay. So this isn't outrageous. And also, when you've had so much falling spending, so more and more of people's money is being spent on the necessities of life, whether it's rent or fuel or food, that means they spend less in the pub and spend less in their local communities. That would lead us towards a demand-driven recession. I mean, even someone like Margaret Thatcher, I'm sure your hero, in 1979 when she came in, at 21% RPI, gave 25% pay rises across the public sector. Do you think that's too much? 25% pay increases across the public sector?
Well, let me just go back to the principle that you talk about, which is inflation. It is coming down. It was 11.1%. It's now 10.7%. It's thought to be have peaked and come down still further.
No, but if it's coming down to 10%, then that's not 19%. That's 4% above the RPI, so it would be 14%. So it's funny that you use the RPI at 14% when you want to say, oh, they're asking too much. But when you're trying to make an argument
I'm not saying they're asking too much. The independent pay review body suggests that it should be 4.75%. Now, just in terms of everyone else, so the ambulance workers have been offered 4%. They only want 11%. So tell me, why is there such disparity between nurses wanting 19 and ambulance workers wanting 11?
Well, they're different unions. I think we also have, you know, that's what they've come to an agreement of. I also think that nurses, for the longest time, have seen this massive shortfall. You've seen starting salaries at between 12 and 14 for nursing assistants. And you saw that over the pandemic, there was this huge sort of recognition and public sympathy and empathy. So you know, I think there's a recognition that it's very difficult for the government to simply alienate them or sort of dehumanize them like they've done in certain other sectors. It's also that when you're a striking worker, the whole point is to demonstrate the importance of that work. And so they've struck, and people have recognized, wow, this is such a valuable part of the economy. It's not like, you know, when we were during the pandemic, certain parts of the economy, the upper end executives sitting in their gated communities, not really doing anything, actually being quite parasitic to the economy, but the essential workers, the essential people in our society that we could literally not function without, like nurses and drivers and people who work in agriculture, people who work in the local shop. Those are the essential workers, and a strike is a demonstration of how valuable those workers are. Whereas executives who are making between 40 and 70% pay increases over the last 3 years are completely useless. And they demonstrated how useless they were during the pandemic, yet we still give them more and more pay rises.
Well, let's just be very clear. I mean, I think in terms of money, there is plenty of money going into the NHS. It's just not hitting the ground. I think many people would agree with that.
Yeah, it's going to the privatised sections of the NHS.
That is not true. 176 billion, another 36 billion went on top of that. But let me just finish the point, which is that what I really object to is nurses going on strike at a time when the NHS is under the most pressure. Now, that also, and not just nurses, but ambulances too. If you have an elderly relative who falls and slips and breaks their gets a fractured neck and femur, they will be lying on the ground. We know the ambulance cannot prioritise them, and they may well die as a result of those injuries. Are you happy with that?
Are you happy with the government not paying them what they're worth?
Are you happy with letting elderly people die?
Yeah, but by not paying them what they're worth, you're letting that elderly person die.
I'm not the government. I'm asking the question.
Yeah, I'm asking you. Are you happy with the government not paying them what they're worth?
I'm nothing to do with the government's pay dispute.
I have nothing to do with the nurses. I have nothing to do with the nurses. I'm saying, are you happy with that?
My question is, taking industrial action at this time to me seems callous in many ways. I would wait until this winter crisis is over. This is a time where we already have all of these people waiting for elective procedures, where we're never going to catch up. And actually, I think what these unions are going to do, and make no mistake, this isn't about individual doctors and nurses, many of whom don't want to strike. They used a disaggregated vote to get this through. But what they want to do is to cripple the government and the NHS. And if you ask me, they're going the right way, where the NHS won't actually exist.
David, do you even know what a disaggregated vote is? Disaggregated vote means that each local body votes on it.
I know exactly what it is.
So that's very democratic. So you're saying, oh, people don't want to. Clearly, a clear majority of nurses.
1 in 4 trusts voted in favour.
Yeah, so then
3 and 4 did not.
So yeah, 3 and 4 will be fine. They won't be disrupted.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what a disaggregated ballot is. It's more democratic in lots of ways. So it undermines your very argument. The second question is that this isn't about displacing government. You think that millions of people across this country are going on strike, taking strike deduction or wage destruction already when they're seeing wage suppression because they want to get the right-wing Labour government, Starmer government. I know this is a talkTV talking point. You guys are like, oh no, it's actually about the government. Last time we had a strike wave this big was 1977. That was during the Labour government. And what do you think they wanted to bring Thatcher in? The idea that this is the reason, this larger political purpose, rather than actually demands over terms and conditions, is patently absurd.
Ashok, I'm afraid time is tight. Thank you very much indeed. That's Ashok Kumar, who's Associate Professor of Political Economy at Birkbeck University. As you can tell, we've crossed swords before, actually, on a number of issues, as you can tell. I mean, I think the point I was trying to make was that it's not just about public sector workers. I think people in the private sector are also finding things incredibly difficult as well.